Welcome to BAL, Building Athletic Lifestyles. I'm Neil. This is the first part of a nutrition mini-series. If you missed the previous fundamentals series, there is a link down below, you can find that there. So we're going to break the nutrition videos down into a few separate parts. The reason for that is I want to first establish a very clear understanding, and then from there give you the tools to manipulate it yourself. If you don't have the understanding yourself, it becomes a lot harder to maintain that and also then tweak the manipulations you make later on. Good, so we're going to kick it off with a few definitions here. We'll run through them. I'll also pop them down here so you can read them out as well as I talk through them, because you probably can't read my terrible handwriting, and I wouldn't blame you for that. Words that I'm sure you will have heard thrown about quite a lot, but we'll get a real clear definition to them, or at least one that we can keep consistent as we work through. So first off, calories. It's essentially the amount of heat energy required to raise 1 gram of water by 1 degree. Typically, we don't actually work in just calories, we work in kilocalories, so instead it's the amount of energy required to heat a kilogram of water by 1 degree. Throughout this video, I will probably just reference some calories, but know that I am actually referring to kilocalories. Good, next up we've got BMR and RMR. They stand for basal metabolic rate and resting metabolic rate. They are somewhat synonymous, but they're not exactly the same. In terms of measuring them accurately, it's quite a restrictive process, but we can make rough estimations towards them using some calculations, which I will pop down here for you with sound effects. So what are they? It's essentially the amount of calories used by the body to maintain organ function, hormone balance, things like that, just when you're at rest. So if you were not moving at all, so typically the tests are done when you're lying down. RMR is typically tested whilst you're asleep. BMR is usually done whilst you're at rest in a room. We can make those approximations that I said before without it being such a restrictive test. We'll get into a little bit more about how we use those figures and manipulate them and the impacts that can have on the body a little further through, just to give you a baseline understanding of what the acronyms actually are, because I will be referencing them as we go through. Good, next we've got TDEE, that stands for Total Daily Energy Expenditure. So this one's broken down into a few different parts. So first part being your BMR, the basal metabolic rate that we already went over. You then have your thermic effect of activity, so TEA. You have your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the calories you will burn, the heat you will expend without actually doing any specific exercise. So think walking to work, walking to the station, things like that, where you're still active, but it's not a preset exercise as such. And then you've also got your thermic effect of food. Good, so that NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, we will refer to that as NEAT. You might hear that referenced further through as we go. That's that exercise that you're doing, your steps, your things like that. That isn't a preset activity that you've gone out to do. You've not gone to the gym specifically to do X, Y, Z. It's just you moving around day to day. So in terms of nutrients, we split them into two parts. So you've got macro and micro, macro being larger, micro being smaller. Macronutrients are your fats, your carbs, your protein. You hear them a lot, and we will talk a little bit more about where you should be aiming with those, and also if they're relevant, how relevant they are as well. Micronutrients much smaller, so think things like your minerals like zinc, magnesium, etc, etc, etc. So now we've got the stodgy stuff done, a few of the definitions out of the way, we're going to bring it down into now how this is actually relevant. So if we look back at the fundamentals series, the most important part to actually making any of those goals was that sustainability and adherence. Coming from that, it's going to be a huge part of your behavior and your lifestyle that will affect your eating as well. So understanding that it has these impacts and these implications, what do we actually care about most? In terms of that sustainability and adherence, it's going to come down to two main things. The first one being nutrient deficiency. It's not for me to say what you're deficient in, because it will be different for everyone. But if you do have some underlying deficiencies, if you're not getting enough of any vitamins or minerals, the impact that you can then get off that will affect your energy levels, your sleep, your ability to work out in terms of power output. It's going to have a number of knock-on effects from that. And then energy balance itself, that's quite a simple one. You'll hear this a lot. It's calories in versus calories out. Yeah. So your energy that you are ingesting, you're actually taking on up against the amount of energy that you burn throughout a day. So now we've got a bit of an understanding of what it is. We're going to dive a little bit into the why, because if you don't cover this is usually where people slip up as well. So it's a huge part of your recovery. If you're looking to make any particular progress, or if you're looking to make a change to your lifestyle, you need to be able to recover from and adapt to those changes that you're making. So that will help with the sustainability, avoiding things like burnout, but also making sure that you are recovering fully to progress from whatever new stimulation you put in. If you think back to the progression video where we were talking about the SAID principle, specific adaptations to imposed demands, we're going to add new demands to the body to adapt to. If it's not recovering from them, you're going to have a hard time sustaining that going on. Risk of injury goes up, but also your ability to just work as hard will go down. Huge part as well is also that it should be goal specific. There's so many times where I've had consultations with people talking about their nutrition, and you go completely Spartan with it and say, wow, I want to lose all of this weight by this timeline. Then you ask them what's that actually going to change, and they have no idea. If you haven't got a goal in mind, if you're not aiming for something, and you also have not dived into where that goal has come from, take that time first before you get into this journey, because it will save you so much hassle down the road. As well, the manipulations we make to your nutrition will be dependent on the goal you're trying to achieve. Good, so how do we even know where we're starting from? Where are we, where's the start to the race? If we can't get to the finish line, it doesn't matter if you haven't even started the race. So we need to first establish where we currently are. How we do that is a couple of ways. The most common is to use some form of tracking, whether it be a food log or using an app on your smartphone, something like that. Well, there's a lot of different options out there, whatever works for you, to give you a rough idea of where you're currently at, to then understand from there what do we change to move on. As well, you can use other methods such as benchmarking. So whether you use everyone's hand is relative to the size of their body, so you can use things like palmfuls or handfuls or thumb size of different amounts of food to give you an idea of roughly how much that's actually coming together as. It's a lot easier, a lot more intuitive to track that as well. Good. Are there any obstacles or issues with this? Absolutely. Because how calories are actually measured, we typically take the values of the dried foods before they're cooked, which isn't obviously going to be inaccurate because some will be lost or burnt or such, or you cook it in oil and will actually gain through whatever process you're actually having to make the food from the raw ingredients. So there is going to be a degree of inaccuracy, but what you'll come down to when we talk a bit more about manipulating it is actually it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you're hitting 2,000 calories or you're hitting 1,950, yeah? Because actually, in the grand scheme of things, 50 calories is going to be too small a margin for us to actually be aiming for to make any significant progress. So we'll come a little bit more into this when we talk about manipulating your figures to actually make sure that you're hitting benchmarks and you're making constant progress. But yeah, don't worry about those inaccuracies for the vast majority of us. If you are an athlete and you are looking at that top level, then yes, it does become more relevant, and you should be trying to track as accurately as possible, because those fine margins, the 1% matter. For most of us, it's largely irrelevant. So to take myself, I'm quite happy to sit at around about 10% body fat all year round, and it's not because I'm being super strict with my food, it's because I'm aiming for a ballpark, and I know that if I hit that ballpark every time, it's far enough in the right position for me to be able to stay lean all year round. Simple, right? Make it a lifestyle, make it a habit, and it's never a problem. Just to give you an example as well of how we actually calculate these things, I've used myself as a guinea pig. So just going through some of the figures and the calculations themselves. So I've got my numbers over here in red, so you can all point and laugh. So I've got my age, 24 years, height, I'm 189 centimeters, and then I'm 84 kilos as well. If you don't work in metric, I've calculated that across for you as well. So basically I'm a little babby man, 24, I'm 6'2", and I'm 185 pounds. Yeah, just to give you a rough idea for you to be able to relate to as well. So there's also, just to complicate things, there's a number of different equations of how you can calculate these things. Find one that works for you and keep it the same. It's got to be consistent. For me, I've found the greatest degree of success with my clients from the Harris-Benedict equation, which again, I will link down here. From that, I calculated that my BMR, my basal metabolic rate, is roughly 1,998 calories. That means if I do nothing all day, if I just lay in bed, which sounds like it would drive me mad, I'm roughly burning about 2,000 calories. From that, we then use activity multipliers to adjust for our TDEE, our total daily energy expenditure. Again, I've used a specific type. You can get different ones. There's different ways of calculating it. Find one, stick to it, and keep it consistent. So I'm using the Catch-Mercado multiplier, and for that one, that brings my total daily energy expenditure up to 3,097 calories, 3,098, 3,100 roughly. Yeah, so now that we've got an idea of the information, we've got an idea of those numbers that we can use, we're going to dive into a little bit more about how we manipulate those. Good. One thing I want to preface with this as well is that nutrition is highly specific. It's very individual, so don't take a one-size-fits-all approach. It's got to be specific to yourself. If you need help with that, find someone that is knowledgeable, hopefully qualified, and can help you with that as well. Also, I am obviously viewing this through a slight bias. I am in the health and fitness industry, but I also have opinions and views on certain things. Not a huge fan of aggressive dieting itself unless it's for a specific timeline. So say you've got an operation coming up and you have to be a certain weight to them even let you in the theatre, which is also then going to consequently affect your recovery, then yes, being aggressive at that point makes sense because you want to hit that threshold. If you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, if you're looking for a quick fix or anything like that, not a fan. This is about a lifestyle. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Yeah. If you hit a position where you can maintain it and you can keep that nutrition going onwards, I'm not saying you have to have the same meal every day, not at all, but you've got benchmarks, guidelines that you can work off of, and we will dive a little bit more into those, so hopefully you then have those guidelines and benchmarks that you can use every day. Talking about every day as well, it's not something that actually you don't have to be on the ball every single day. A day off in your life is not going to take the wheels off the bus, yeah? If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll get back to you from there. Please like the video, hit subscribe for that next video that comes out about actually manipulating the numbers, and I'll see you in the next one.